Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to From the Hearts of Men radio show / podcast. I am your host, Kocysha LaShaun, founder of Be Accelerated into Purpose and overseer of Humbled by His Grace Ministries. I am so happy that y'all are tuned in today for another amazing show. We have had some awesome guests so far, and I am super excited. Again, y'all gonna hear me say that a lot, super excited, because a lot of these men I personally know, have worked with or gone to school with. And so the gentleman today is actually a dear friend and a classmate who happens to be a father, a husband, and also the pastor of St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church. He is Alpha Phi Alpha, and he is also the founder and president of Norman Education Fund, and so much more. So I'm just going to let him introduce himself more. So thank you, Jack, for being here. That is our guest today. I forgot to even say his name, Jack Norman III. Thank you so much for being here. I am super excited, as you can tell. So just tell the audience, tell us more about who is Jack Norman.
Hey, well, Kocysha, first say thank you just for putting this all together and have a heart to reach out and help others. I think we're really going to touch some lives and reach some people with this podcast / work that you're doing, and not just the podcast, but all the work that you're doing. So I salute you in that. Let me just say that up front. So as you mentioned, I am Jack Norman. I'm a native of Helena, Arkansas. Grew up youngest of three, product of a divorced home. I'm 43 years old now, and as you mentioned, I'm a husband and father. Also, I will wear a lot of different titles: pastor, preacher, also a community activist, a philanthropist, a lot of different titles, and just feel grateful in the season that I'm in my life. I've been able to basically walk in my purpose. I've been able to help others. There's nothing that gives my heart greater joy than reaching out and helping others, whether that's through my preaching, through just encouraging people along the way, through ministry, through the Norman Education Fund. So there's a lot that went between, being born in 1978 and now, all the time. So we'll get into that a little bit. But I guess the main thing I want to say, for those that are listening, is that, that God is good. That, through all of our mess ups and through all our missteps, that God has been faithful and he will keep you. And when you put the business of God first, he'll put you first. When you take care of his business, he'll take care of your business. So if I could, sum my whole life up, and if I could encourage anybody, I just say, trust God, just trust God with whatever it is you're dealing with. And if you do all that you can humanly do, and then just trust God with the outcome. So,
Awesome. Well, I am going to jump right into it. So what most people don't know is that I've actually transcribed some sermons before. So I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to hear so much about your ministry, how you got started, where you are now, the ups and downs of it all. So for this show, I want to focus in on, we've had a couple of ministers already and a couple of more to come. I want to hone in on when you were called to ministry. What was in your head? Was that a struggle? We know we hear a lot of times people are called to something and they don't automatically just give God their yes. Sometimes it's Lord, you sure you're talking to the right person? So kind of tell us what your beginning was when you felt the call to ministry for our listeners. Again, we're honing in on people who, and maybe you're not in ministry that's listening, maybe you feel God calling you to something else. So I believe that what Jack has to share will help you in making that transition into what God is calling you to do. So the floor is all yours, Jack.
Well, yeah, so let me just give you a little bit of context. I've been in church primarily my whole life. There were some seasons where I was in the church and the church wasn't in me, but I've always been in church. I've always been a student of the word. When I moved to Monroe, Louisiana in 2001 for a job, I joined with True Vine Baptist Church, and there things just kind of took off for me just from a ministry standpoint. I had planned on being just a regular church attendee, a good tithe-paying, faithful church member. And the Lord began to elevate me. And I got moved to the position of a deacon, which in my mind, I thought deacons were all old elderly men that just did things in the church. And it took me being taught and getting into scripture to see the role of a deacon and how it really is an extension of the pastor, and it's for the, I guess, just for overall improvement of the church, even outside of the four walls. So I had to be taught that. And then I became chairman of the deacons, and I'm about 27 years old. So I'm one of the youngest chairman of the deacons in the whole state of Louisiana. So in the midst of all this, I'm still serving in ministry. I'm doing food ministry. I'm doing evangelism outside the church, also doing Sunday school teaching. So I'm doing all these things, and then I hear the voice of the Lord saying, come on, I want you to do more. And I'm already telling God, like, I already feel like I'm doing enough. I'm doing enough. And then so my calling became clear. And all along the way, I've had people tell me, hey, are you a preacher? I know you've been called a preacher, but I always wait to make sure I heard that from God. So if there's somebody listening, man, just make sure you're calling, whatever you're being called to, make sure it's God-led and not just a good idea. So people can put you in positions and places where God hadn't called you to be. So not that I was waiting on God, because I really didn't want that calling. I was just, if I was going to make that step, it was going to be God-led. So somewhere around 2008, I woke up one morning and I had a dream, and this dream was not like other dreams. Sometimes you have dreams and you don't remember what they were. You remember bits and pieces. This dream was in HD. It was vivid. I remember I saw myself preaching, and it was clear that once I woke up that, that God was calling me to the next level of ministry, which was preaching. And I would tell anybody, if God calls you to a big task like that and you go the first time, it's probably not God, because when you think about your purpose is something bigger than you. Your purpose is something that you've got to say, Lord, if you don't do this, if you don't give me courage, if you don't give me wisdom, if you don't give me strength, if you don't give me persistence, I can't get through this. So if your purpose is something that you can do on your own, then God is not in it. So I said it to say that, if God is calling you to start a nonprofit, maybe he's calling you to go back to school, maybe he's calling you to start the business, whatever it is, it's supposed to be bigger than you. Your dreams are supposed to be bigger than your vision. It's supposed to be bigger than your bank account. And so in the midst of all that, God is dealing with me. And man, it was me and God had we almost had like a year-long conversation just back and forth, because I didn't want to go. I did not want to preach. So that, that's kind of the genesis of where I am now. I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version, but that's what happened from 2008 as a transition into 2009 into ministry.
So if you don't mind being transparent, can you share why you did not want to go into ministry? Why you didn't want to preach?
Well, there's a list of reasons. First of all, I saw my own imperfections. First of all, I knew my own insecurities, my own issues, so to speak. I saw my own at times. I saw my own ability to procrastinate that I deal with. I mean, I just saw all my character flaws like came to the surface, and it must have been the enemy telling me, no, you're not good enough. You're not qualified. You're not, you do this too much, or you don't do this enough, or you don't pray enough. So all these, there's a million different things that came against me. I mean, there's like, you remember seeing that cartoon where there's an angel on one shoulder, and there's right. I'm talking to God, and I know it's a word from God, but then here's the enemy saying, no, you're not qualified. So that was one reason. Another reason, I mean, I saw what preachers went through. I saw what my pastor went through. And when people cannot attack the message, they attack the messenger. Mm-hmm. And so I'm witnessing this in all real time, even in the ministry that I'm in. And I'm just like, this is not, God, I'll be faithful to you. I'll serve you. I'll help other people. But preaching is not something that that was not on my to-do list. It wasn't on my checkoff list. So, but we had a long conversation. God turned up the fire on me sometimes. And then sometimes I thought he had left me alone for a period, and he just had me on simmer. Just like you have a pot that's on the stove, is still cooking, but it's just simmering. And God's like, no, I ain't, I clearly thought about, the dream was in September. So around about January, February, I thought that God had kind of said, I thought God had changed his mind, and I was cool with that.
Right.
I was fine with that. I was like, yes, and I had been calling some of my closest friends and some of my other pastor friends, said, hey man, I think I've been called to preach. And I was wanting one of them to tell me, no, you ain't been called. And not one of them, I'm looking for, it's funny, I felt like God was saying something to me, but I'm looking for man to say, no, they didn't say that, so that's just kind of the headspace I was in mentally. I was kind of worn out. Physically, I didn't have an appetite. So there was a lot of different things going on. Now, mind you, I've been married and I hadn't even told my wife any of this.
Okay.
And so it was about 6 months in that I even told my own pastor at the time, Greg Oliver. I told him, had a conversation. So like I said, it's a lot that went on there. God at one point said to me, I could just kill you. I could just get rid of you.
Wow.
And I said, Lord, let's talk about this.
Right. Like, wow.
Let's God, and I said that to say in the context of that, man, God don't need us to do anything. If you won't do it, God will find somebody to do whatever it is that task is. So don't think you're doing God any favors by walking in your purpose. That's what he designed you for. And if you do anything other than that, you're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to find real joy. You're not going to be happy until you're in the will of God. So that's the context of all of that. And like I said, during the midst of all that, I know there was a lot of sleepless nights. There was a lot of soul searching. But I'm glad that I said yes. That whole process is something that I can preach about and share with other people. And it's a testimony, not just for preaching, but just for what that God is calling you to.
Right. And like you said, it's not just for somebody, it's just not for the field of preaching. So you shared with us why you didn't want to preach. So what was the turning point that made you finally give your yes to God? What was, because again, somebody may be going through that same situation and it's like feeling the same thing, like, Lord, I don't feel qualified for this, or maybe they have a checkered past that a word is going to come up and people are looking at that. People have wrote them off, but God is still waiting for them to come to the forefront. Like, people have wrote you off, but I've not written you off. All I need is your yes. So what was the turning point for you that actually made you say yes?
Like I said, it was kind of like giving
cutting in. I'm sorry, Jack. I'm just going to intervene just a sec. Your mic is cutting in and out a little bit. And I want to make sure that we hear everything, all the nuggets that you're dropping here.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, sir, I can. Okay.
All right. So, your question was, again, what was the turning point in terms of just really firmly and wholeheartedly coming into ministry? You heard me often say this yourself, even when people that wrote you off, God will write you back in. So
right.
The truth of the matter is that, somebody somewhere doesn't like you. Somebody somewhere is always going to have something to say about you. But, we have to make it up in our mind and in our hearts that we're living to please God and not please man. So the turning point for me, again, this was an ongoing process. It was almost like a pregnancy. It was like being pregnant in September and then being able to work through all the growing pains and the labor pains until I got to a point where I had to give birth to this baby. And so I told my pastor about it. He said, I've been waiting on you to say that. I definitely think you've been called, and in the midst of this, a lot of these sermons that he's preaching, it's like they're tailor-made for me. I know that's the word of God sometimes, like, we have 150, 200 people in service on Sunday, and it feels like he's just talking to me. For whatever it is I was struggling with. I remember this one particular sermon, I believe, but help my unbelief.
Right.
And I remember that word was a right on time word for what I was dealing with in that moment as I'm having this dialogue with God, so to speak, back and forth. But for me, the turning point was the fact that I looked over my life and I realized that God's hand had been on my life. He's been too good to me for me not to give him my all. And then secondly, Kocysha, the question that, I guess if there was one question that was a turning point, I felt God was asking me, there are some people that are only going to go to heaven because you preach to them. And are you willing to let them go to hell because you're being hard-headed?
Wow.
So something in the context of that there are people that you're somebody's next blessing. You're somebody's blessing.
You're somebody's answer.
We would go to church and they would say, hey, all the preachers stand up, and there would be 50 preachers stand up. And I'd be saying, God, see, you got all these preachers. You don't need me. And he's like, I need Jack Norman, though. I need Kocysha LaShaun. Like, you're thinking, God, you got people. You got somebody to do this. You're not hurting. He's like, yeah, but I need you. There's something tailor-made for you. There's a blessing. There's a purpose. There's a calling with your name on it. There are people that are only going to hear the gospel, are only going to receive it through you. And so are you willing to go to heaven and leave all these other people behind because you're hard-headed, because you're not willing to lay down your will and your plan for your life and pick up my will and my plan for your life.
Wow, I absolutely love that, especially the part about being tailor-made. And I recall a commercial or something that I've seen where they show the aisle in the store with all the loaves of bread, and it's like you got 100 loaves of bread, but it's like you're still unique regardless of how many others are around you. So I love that you said that about being tailor-made, because just because there are other preachers, just because there are other entrepreneurs, just because there are other businessmen doing whatever, it doesn't mean God has created you and put something in you that will reach certain people. That, again, there are people that you can reach, Jack, that I cannot reach. There are people that I can reach that you cannot reach. So we all have a task. We all have an assignment. We all have a tribe or a group of people that we are called to minister to teach, to train, whatever the case may be. So thank you for pointing that out. So we've talked about your humble beginnings and how you got to the point of saying yes. And I know that it's been a journey and it's been a process. So one of the things I want to ask too, and this is, I think, is always important, because for those who are married, so how was that conversation with your wife when you told her that you felt the call to go into ministry? And again, for those of you who are listening, this may be, you may have being called to go into another job, change positions. And if you're married, then obviously this is not a decision that you can make on your own. This is like, you need to talk to your spouse. So what are some tips? What was that process like for you in talking to your wife? And what are some tips that you can give listeners about how to have that conversation? Because that can be hard, especially because I know in some situations, in the churches that I've been in, some people have been called to go to another country, which means uprooting their family, uprooting their kids. So it's like, this is some of these assignments can get really, really heavy, where it's like, it's not just affecting you, but it's affecting your family. So go ahead and share with us, how was that conversation with your wife, and what tips can you give those who listen?
Yeah, so my wife and I, we're college sweethearts. We've been married this month. As a matter of fact, it'll be 20 years this month.
Congratulations.
When she first met me, she knew I was godly and I went to church and all that stuff, but I was not preaching. And that's one of the things I say I pray a little bit harder for her, because what she's in now is not initially what she signed up for, so to speak. It's if you marry somebody and they're preaching or they're pastoring, I wasn't doing either.
Right.
When we got married. So for me, it was a tough conversation from the standpoint just to get to that point. I remember going out to dinner vividly, and I cried the whole dinner. And I'm sure the wait staff probably thought that we were breaking up or something, because I lifted the whole dinner. And what I was going to tell her, she didn't know. She was thinking I was going to tell her that I was sick or something like that. So she really had no clue. I mean, we're pretty close, but there's still some things you kind of keep close to the vest until you're really ready to share, because I didn't have the words to share, and I wasn't convinced that I was going to do it. So I basically told her, hey, I feel like I've been called to preach. And in the midst of my tears, I'm saying that, and she's like, well, yeah, I figured that day would come sometime, And
wow.
I told her, I said, hey, I don't want to. My hesitancy is that I don't want to disappoint God. And she said something to me that if I live to be 100 years old, I'll never forget. She said, the only way you'll disappoint God in this is if you don't go.
Exactly.
So God is looking for your yes. He's not looking for, I think we think that God is looking for ability, but he's looking for availability. You don't have to be the or the smartest. You don't have to be the 4.0 student. You don't have to have 1 million degrees. God is not intimidated by that, but God doesn't need that. What God needs is a made up mind. He needs a heart that's going to fight through perseverance, and he needs somebody with some hands that'll get down and do the work that takes place in the trenches of ministry. That's what he really needs. So my advice to anybody, again, first of all, is just to be transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Transparent. Be authentic with your mate. I've got some preachers in my circle who are married and their wives don't support their ministry. And I tell them, I was like, a lot of times, why, and this is what I believe, this has been my experience, a woman will not support you when you are inconsistent. So if you're in the church preaching one thing and you're at home doing something totally opposite of that, well, then I could firmly see why she does it. So when I hear that from brothers, my next question is always, oh, what are you doing at home? You're preaching about love in the pulpit, but you're not displaying that at home. You're preaching about commitment in the pulpit, but you're another person at home. So for me, and I thank God that my character at home was consistent enough where my wife was willing to follow me into preaching ministry and willing to support me, and when I was called a pastor, she was willing to support that. So we're in a sweet place now, but it hadn't always been like that. I'm Baptist by birth or Baptist by upbringing. She was Catholic by upbringing. So there was always a little bit of friction there. There was always, because it's just kind of two different worlds, two different upbringings. So we had to work through all of that. We had to have some tough conversations, some uncomfortable conversations, but I think any strong woman wants to submit, and a woman will submit when you give her something to submit to. So we, as men, we've got to be consistent. We've got to be authentic. We've got to be transparent. We've got to be able to chart the course for our family and say, hey, this is where we want to be in the next year or the next 5 years, and be consistent with it. And then when we make mistakes along the way, it's not the end of the world. Let's talk about it. Again, let's not be closed off. Let's not blow up about it on one extreme, but then let's not just be quiet and sweep it under the rug. Let's have some real meaningful and productive dialogue and continue to move on.
Awesome. I love it. And it leads me into, I have two questions, but the first question is this. You talked about your consistency and how that helped your wife be more supportive. So that also lends to leadership. I know that a lot of times, leadership starts in the home. If you're a leader at the home, then obviously it'll reflect. So I want you to kind of give some tips or speak to that, so to speak. I know that because I know you have a 9 to 5. I know you also have a job that you work. So you can kind of plug that in if you want to, like how, because as a minister, because you have to look at it too, like he's taken you from this one person who maybe has never been over people to now you're becoming a preacher or a pastor, where it's not just your life, it's not just your family life, but now you got 20 other different families that you got to deal with and minister and lead. So again, you don't necessarily have to be a pastor. Maybe God is calling you from maybe where you were just the lay person to now leading 20 people or something like that. So kind of speak to us about leadership, how that even played a part, so to speak, from the home and from your job into what God called you to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think Jesus gives us a perfect model of just a servant leadership. Meaning that you're willing to serve. You're not asking people to do what you're not willing to do. So, in leadership for me, I've always defined it's what you do, it's not what you say. You may think that you're a great leader, but if you would ask the people that are following you, they really give you the grade, so to speak, on what type of leadership you are, what type of leadership you have. So my style is more of I like to dialogue with people. This is not my way or the highway. I'm flexible. I think for a lot of men that know they've married a smart woman, a godly woman, such as myself, there's a lot of things that your wife will give you counsel on that makes sense. As a woman, as a helpmeet, meaning to help you, to assist you, along the way. Now, of course, the final decision is yours, but don't turn your back on the insight of what your wife may bring to the table, just in terms of ideas and things that will help the family move forward collectively. But leadership is tricky, though. Leadership is tricky. I know specifically in my experience, like people will, in terms of pastoring, people will want you to preach to them, but they don't want you to pastor them. They don't want you to take a leadership role in their lives, and that's kind of a struggle sometimes. And I can't force myself to be somebody's pastor. But that's something that they have to allow me to do, to be their spiritual leader. And when they do that, I think, again, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And then we also have to hold the people that we're leading, we have to hold them accountable as well. Mm-hmm.
So accountability. Speak to us more about accountability. How can we allow ourselves, how can men allow themselves to be more accountable in what they're doing? What are some things, what are some tips that you may have for them as far as accountability is concerned?
Well, I would certainly say, we okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I would say as well, the accountability is it's a big fancy word, but what it really means is just somebody to make you to help you along the path to do what you probably already know is right. So I would say, to every brother out there, every sister out there, everybody needs an accountability partner. Somebody that's going to hold you accountable, and it may not be your best friend. It may be just somebody that you can have some hard conversations with. And I think it's so critical and imperative. If you want to be the best version of yourself, you've got to have somebody outside of yourself to hold you accountable, whatever that may be. In your finances, in your physical health, and your mental health, and your time management. You've got to have somebody that holds you accountable. It may be a therapist for some of you. It may be a close family member that you can confide in. It may be a coworker. Whoever God has put in your path to hold you accountable, embrace that. Don't go away from that. Don't fall away from that. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, and I had wrote in my notes, is this notion of daddy issues.
Okay.
We often attach that to women. She has daddy issues. But I would say, and I firmly stand on this based on my own experiences, that men also have daddy issues.
Right.
The father was not there, or maybe he was there and he was abusive, or he was alcoholic, or he was, maybe he was a rolling stone, or whatever the case may be. And I think us as men, and I don't care how old you get, a man is always looking for affirmation from another man. Not necessarily a father, maybe an uncle. For me, it's some pastors that are older than me that have come alongside of me and brought me in as a quote unquote as a spiritual son. And I know they have my best interests at hand. So we have to be affirmed by other men. Men of our same age, and then men that are older than us that we can look up to. And I think that's very critical and imperative that you have somebody in your life that can serve in that role as a father figure. When we went to prison ministry, did prison ministry about 7 years, the overwhelming fact in a room of about 100 men, about 90% of them did not have fathers in the home, and about the same number of them did not finish high school. So then we have the two things there that you can't put a price on having a father in the home, not discrediting the role of the mother. I'm not doing it, but I'm saying having a father in the home that's going to hold you accountable in the right way. And then also getting educated. When I'm saying educated, I'm not meaning going to college. I'm just saying learning a trade or going to welding school or carpentry school. So they had nothing to fall back on. So they had no support system growing up, and then there's nothing to fall back on. So I think, the lives of Black men particularly are a lot better off when we've had a Black male to hold us accountable growing up. And then when we were able to gain that sense of freedom and wealth building that comes with an education.
Okay, I want to switch the tune a little bit. So you're talking about daddy issues, and for those of you who don't know, I am an author, and my last book was titled From the Heart of God to the Hearts of Men. And Jack has actually had the opportunity to read it and actually provide me a review for it. And one of the things that I noted in that book, I was listening to another podcast, and I heard this man say, who's a preacher, and I don't know, maybe in his 40s or something. And one of the things he shared was that he did not know how to take God's love. And a lot of times people don't know how, people don't understand God fully because they see him through the lens of how they view their own earthly parents. And so because maybe they, again, like you said, been in a home where maybe they didn't have a dad, or maybe they've been in an abusive home, or maybe because of something in their lifestyle, their parents have disowned them and threw them away. And so because that's how they view their earthly parents, that's how they view God. And so that book that I wrote was about the love and grace of God and reminding men of who they are to God. So I want you to kind of speak to that, because for some people, to be honest, they still don't have that male mentor or that male figure that they can actually go to. So in those cases, how can I look at a God? How can I go to a God that I can't see and get love from him and receive love from him when I'm not receiving it here on earth? Can you speak to that?
Well, again, I think it's just important to to find a ministry. We're in a difficult place right now because we're still virtual, but we're trying to transition back into the church. And I just think the church, and I'm not saying the church is perfect, but I think that the intent of the church is when you're in a group of believers who are all struggling on some wavelength, but we're all there together to lift each other up. That's why I think the church is the one place that we ought to be able to go to consistently and be able to get help, to be able to get encouragement, to be able to gain strength. And I think that part's important. So I would say, make sure you align with a ministry, even if it's a home ministry or just something, a men's group or something, again, that where you can get with like-minded people and really unburden your soul, and through prayer, through fasting, I think God will reveal some things to you that are always been there, but maybe you never saw it. And so we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone to get what God has for us. And a big part of that is sharing who we really are and being willing to receive the love that God has for us. I think Luke 15, when you look at the prodigal son, it gives us an awesome picture of the love of a father. And
Right.
I certainly, hear what you're saying. And I think I said the a couple of weeks ago in the sermon that God is a promise keeper.
Right.
And we can't fully embrace that because throughout our lives, we've had so many people that have broken promises to us.
Right.
A God who, when he says it, it settles it. We can't fully appreciate when he says in his word that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. We can't really fully appreciate that because we've heard words before from human people and they've fallen short of that word. And so we take that same mismanagement of skills, so to speak, and we put that label on God, and God is like, I'm God. I don't need you to co-sign. I don't need you to be anything else but to follow me. And when you realize, man, that's an awesome place to be, when you understand that even in the midst of your brokenness, that
Right.
God, you in the midst of your foolery, in the midst of your sinfulness, that
Right.
we have that looks beyond all that and still sees our needs. And so, Kocysha, we really don't see agape love that the Bible talks about, unconditional type of love. Our love is conditional. If you love me, I'll love you back. Well, that's not godly love.
Right.
The type of love that Jesus showed us on the cross was a agape love, meaning that you don't, it's not based on merit. You don't have to work for this. You can't work for this. There's nothing you can do. You can't be good enough, And so to whoever's listening may get this interview, you may have walked 1,000 miles away from God. You may feel like you're 1,000 miles away from God, but the journey to coming back is just one step. That's just how great his love is. That's just how deep his grace is. You say, well, it doesn't make sense. Well, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it makes a miracle. And it proves to us again why we serve the God that we serve.
Awesome. So you mentioned the word fasting. I've been in several groups, a lot of women groups where that's part of the project or whatever it may be. But in my own personal life, and I'm not sure about yours, but I've come across many men who don't understand what fasting is. So can you give us a brief understanding of in simple terms of what fasting is, what it involves, and how it brings clarity, what it will bring to their life? Because again, a lot of people, they understand it from the corporate level and they feel like that's the only time to do it. And then it's really about, sometimes it becomes more so about losing weight. Sometimes it becomes more so about what you eat, but it's more and it's deeper than that. So can you kind of expound on that for us?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
I'll do the best I can with, fasting, I guess for me is putting down something natural in order to pick up something spiritually. That's the most succinct way I can put it.
Right.
So there's in the scripture where whether I think I alluded to it earlier, where they're trying to cast out the demon out of this young man, and Jesus later on tells them this: you can only break through with this only by prayer and fasting. So prayer and fasting are like roommates; they go hand in hand. And if you're just fasting, then you're really just dieting, and then it does really just become about weight loss. But it's prayer and fasting. And so for many of us, and I hear you say this, even when I have rolled out a fast at my church from a corporate level, I still never force anybody to do it. But as I say, but if you do jump on board, you need to stay on board. So if we're fasting for 14 days and we're not supposed to eat bread or whatever it is, and you slip up and do it, it doesn't mean you're out. It means you start back over. You finish out. And so it's uncomfortable for many because it makes us pause and recognize that there are some things that we need to say no to for a period of time. And we don't like to do that. In this society of overindulgence, we want what we want as much as we want. And for us to take a step back and say, hey, if your thing is drinking Coke, well, then I'm not drinking Coke for the next 7 days. That's a struggle for some people.
Right.
That's a struggle. What may be a struggle for you may not be a struggle for me. Some people may be coffee. Some people, whatever it is, some people, like, it's hard for me not to eat meat. So when we would fast for 30 days and not eat meat, that was a real struggle for me. Like, yeah, that was weight loss, but that wasn't the primary reason why I was doing it. So you just have to, and I certainly agree, it ought to be something that you do. It ought to be a regular part of your Christian walk, but don't let it become routine, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Do something like a meatless Monday, where on Mondays they don't eat meat. Or maybe they skip a meal on certain days or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways. There's not a cookie cutter approach to doing it. Again, it has to be something that's going to be hard for you. For some of us, we've taken it past just food. It may be social media. It may be TV. Right. There you go. It may be cell phone. You say, I'm not going to use my cell phone after 7 p.m. or whatever it is that's going to afflict you and get you out of your comfort zone, and it's going to redirect your attention and your focus to something that's godly and productive. So again, it's not just food. Food is a big part of it, and then there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Whether you skip breakfast or you skip lunch or you're doing one meal a day for a period of time, that's totally up to you. And I think what it shows you, it'll give you a lot of spiritual enlightenment. It'll give you clarity. It'll show you that there's a lot of things that you thought that you couldn't live without, that you can live without. You can't live without Cokes. You can't live without coffee. You can't live without bread, whatever it is that you wrestle with. You can't live without sweets, so I think fasting really shows us who we are, but ultimately it shows us who God really is.
Right. Thank you. And you actually touched on several things that I'm glad you touched on, especially with the, it shows us who we are. And we realize that, we were dependent on certain things, but we realized when we gave it up that, I didn't really need that as much as I thought I did. Or, a lot of times we struggle with things, or we become codependent on things, thinking that's what we need to fulfill or to give us a certain feeling. When we let that go and we get in the presence of God, it's like, this feels even better than what that was making me feel. But I also want to just kind of piggyback on what you said, as far as when we are letting these things go, that we also want to make sure that we're inviting God in, that we are doing something God related. So that may be family time together, reading, doing Bible study, or meditating, or listening to a sermon, or listening to praise and worship. You want to make sure, one thing that I teach on a lot is, when you remove something, make sure you're not leaving that empty space. We need to make sure, especially so, with fasting, it is to help you gain clarity on whatever decisions you have in life, but also to just bring you closer to God. Thank you for sharing on that, Jack. So you've done prison ministry. Just to take us out, what are some other tips that you've seen that you can speak to, as far as different issues that you've seen with men, as far as moving into their purpose or moving into their calling? Give us some last words on, for a man out there who may be listening and it's like, I feel God calling me to this, but I'm just not sure. I don't have the support, or I don't have the finances, I don't have the resources, all of these different excuses. Give us some final words. What can you encourage our men with?
So I think the first thing is that we got to be transparent and real with ourselves. That we have to the Luke chapter 15 reference, the prodigal son that left home. The scripture says that he came to himself, that he realized where he was not only physically but mentally, spiritually, and you have to be upfront with somebody. Now we need to go to God with our issues, but we also we need to have physical people that we can touch and talk to, and that's why I think therapy is important. Finding somebody that you can confide in. Again, somebody who will speak to you and really hold you accountable. So, one of the things I was listening to this morning, Kocysha, was a Sha'Carri Richardson story. This is a young man from the Olympics who was banned, I think, from the Olympics or facing a suspension due to a positive marijuana test. And I thought to myself, man, and you hear on social media, you see people on either side of the equation. Right. And I'm going somewhere. See people on either side of the equation, that rules are rules, and then there's other people that are saying, give her some grace. And I firmly think that both of those are right. Right. I don't have to be on either side of the fence. I mean, two things can be right. I don't have to, we can hold somebody accountable, but still show them empathy at the same time. We can say, yes, rules are rules, but yeah, we understand the context of why you fell short. And so when we would just be real and offer grace and try to seek to understand instead of seek to be heard, I think our lives will be made the better. I would also say to men, just, hey, brother, you don't always have to be Superman. A lot of times we want to be Superman. We want to have all the answers. Our innate, what's in our DNA as men, is to fix everything. And sometimes your wife or your spouse or your significant other will have a problem that you cannot fix. And really what she's wanting to you just to be a listening ear. So we've got to be good listeners. We've got to be willing to hold back our anger and keep our emotions in check. We've got to be willing to do the work that comes along with just being a man. But ultimately, I think, we've got to lead in a godly way. And that's more about what we say and how we live than it is about what we actually say.
Gotcha. Thank you. So before we end this show, Jack, give us your social media handles, your website, what you have going on. How can people get in touch with you? I know that you are a part of so many things, got your hand in so many different things. So yes, give us your contact information, anything that you have coming up, or how they may be able to donate to some of your causes.
Hey, well, yeah, certainly. My Cash App is $JNorman06, and we have used that Cash App to do so many things in ministry, from the hygiene project, where we filled up over probably close to 1,000 bags of just hygiene items for the homeless and the needy. We've also did some superstar teacher programs where we've recognized teachers in the community and the job that they've done, especially over this past year with COVID. Also continue to do the Norman Education Fund, where we've given away over $12,000 this year to help some kids go off to school. So there's a myriad of things that I've had my hand in, and God has just blessed, and it's through the help of other people like yourself, Kocysha, who have come along and poured into the ministry. I am on Facebook, Jack Norman, as well as Jack Norman Ministries. I am on Twitter, at the Jack Norman altogether, the same handle on Instagram, at the Jack Norman. That's all together. And also as well, my Faith for the Future is my 30-day devotion, my first book, who you were well in tune with. And again, I applaud you for helping me bring that to the people in the role you played and just helping me get organized with that. And I look forward, and I need your help again soon. So thank you for your Faith for the Future. It's $10, a 30-day devotional you can find on Amazon. Again, that's Faith for the Future, and that's available on Amazon.com. So many more things to come, more book projects to come, more ministry projects to come. But thank you today for interviewing me, and thank you for those of you that are listening. Let me know how we can partner with you. Let me know if there's any other questions that you would want to ask directly. You can email me at pastorjack1906@icloud.com. Again, that's pastorjack1906@icloud.com, or you can just reach out via Facebook or any of those other social media outlets. So we're here to partner with you, to pray with you and pray for you. And again, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for listening as well. And if there's anything else I could do to help you specifically, or those of you that are listening, please let us know and reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. Make sure y'all reach out to him. One of the things that I love about your ministry and about your teaching is how you also talk a lot about the love and grace of God. And that's not to omit that God overlooks our sin or is condoning our sin, but I love how you talk about how he is the loving and graceful God that he is, and a merciful God that he is. And you know how we still all have a chance, whether we're on our second chance, third chance, or fourth chance. So that's what I love about you. So, you know, again, those of you who are listening and maybe you not connected with someone who understands that, or who always, maybe the people you come in contact with are always trying to still put you down or bash you. And we have enough men bashing as is. So I definitely recommend Jack Norman, Pastor Jack Norman, if you are that man seeking someone to just talk to and confess to, or like you said, he is open and available. So thank you again, Jack, for being here. Thank y'all for tuning in. I hope that it is my prayer that your ears have received, that your spirit has received the nuggets that he has put down for us on this afternoon. And with that being said, I pray that you all have an awesome rest of this Monday. Be safe and remember to be a blessing to someone else. Thank you.
Amen.